So, what questions or comments do you have about what we just did before lunch, if you remember it? Anyone? Of course, we've got the whole post-lunch queue. Two over here.
We got some up front there.
I feel like I'm running an Oprah show with my assistant running up and down with it. You is a dirty rat! Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One of the standard things we have, like in the Elman induction,
Yeah.
is obviously the fractionation part.
Yes.
But the standard instruction is to bring them out. And when you were doing the fractionation part, you were doing something slightly different. Was feel like you're becoming awake rather than becoming awake.
Exactly.
Can you explain what you think is the different effect between those two?
Basically, I don't want to bring them all the way back up here. I want to get them to hover somewhere around here and get this effect of their thinking that they're up there. I personally think that if they think they're out of trance, you get that effect, and that's part of what creates the deeper dipping thing afterwards. So, by creating the illusion that they're out, so there's ambiguity at least, then it gives them the opportunity to kind of come out but not fully, so they can dive in deeper afterwards. That's the main thinking behind that. Experiment, it may work just as well for you the other way. I don't like getting people fully alert. I want to get people just on the cusp of consciousness before the roller coaster, like a roller coaster ride, It just gets up the top and it just slows down, teasing you, you go, oh, here we go, and here you go down again. It's kind of like that.
So with fractionation, is it usually the case that you get them so deep that they have no idea how many times they were
It's not
fractionated?
unusual, let's put it that way. I wouldn't say it's every time like that, but it certainly isn't unusual for them to kind of lose the plot a little bit. Hence, you want to have things like my voice will go with you. That's particularly important at that point, because if they're floating off in fairyland and you're not there with them, you never know, you might find a bad fairy as well. The one that makes them sleep forever.
If it isn't the case that they forget it all, I mean, it's still very effective, right?
The key thing is, and this is an interesting point, this happens more often with, for example, hypnosis tapes people listen to. It happens with induction, especially with group induction sometimes too, where people go, well, I don't know, I feel like I fell asleep there. And then the question to ask is, why did you come back? And I don't know, I just felt like it. But you end up coming back at exactly the point that you asked for. So that tends to be one of those tests. And sometimes when I have that in the session, I'll make that point like, well, you must be a damn good sleeper because I said it's time to come back and at count of 5, and at count of 5 you were back. How do you do that? I don't know. That's right, you don't know, do you? And we go into the whole non-awareness set thing, which is for the next few days. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Great.
I have one more. This one may be an obvious no, but I was just wondering,
No,
can you use...
No, you can't.
Can you use any fractionation principles inside of self-hypnosis, or... I mean, it seems like it'd be hard to use, but...
Sure. Yeah, I'm guessing in some respects you're doing it when you're doing the kind of setting the scene with my arms heavy type thing before we go to regular hypnosis. And I'm sure that if you experiment with it, go home, put yourself in trance, come back out, put yourself in trance. I could see that working pretty good. I have to admit I haven't done it, but I could see it working really good. Leonard's obviously done it, and he seems very happy with it. So yeah, I think it's a great idea. Any other comments or questions on... Go ahead, for GW over here. Hello, anyone? Handy helpers right here, front row, Josh. There you go.
With people that, shall we say, are the most resistant, you were talking about Erickson and the young man that blew everybody away. What have you found to be, in your experience, the best way of working with someone who says they want it, but their resistance level is very, very high?
Mind-bending language, day 3.
Okay.
Sometimes on awareness set, but mind-bending language, day 3 is exactly what that's designed for. Go ahead. Oh, Rashid over there.
Thank you.
Whoo, that was close.
The question is regarding this, the double dipping, and I guess the fractionation is essentially repetitive sequences of the double dipping over and over again.
That's kind of how I see it as well, yes.
So the question is, once you get the person at that plateau when they spike back down.
This point right here?
Correct.
Yeah.
And you've told them now, okay, I'm going to bring you back. So that little part of the conscious mind, as you said, let's go. They come back up into that area.
So they're coming up to there, yeah?
Right. So do you do the count first, 1, 2, 3, and you bring them out so then they're actually, you finished it, but then they're in that foggy area and then drop them again?
You can bring them up all the way. As far as they're concerned, they're fully conscious and alert. But the afterglow is there regardless. You can't help. It's part of how, think of it like an old-fashioned TV set. And when you turn it off, the tube just goes zoom and glows for a few minutes longer before the glow disappears. It's kind of how this thing works. When you turn it off, it's off, right? The TV is off. And yet that glow still exists, and it's a little bit like that. But because, remember, to a greater extent, suggestibility is not a function of depth of trance. Although some people will say I'm completely wrong in this. In my experience, it's more a question of how little interference you have, or how much interference you have. Interference, of course, comes from the critical factor. So the less the interference, the more suggestible they are. Now, traditionally, going deeper into a more profound state has shut off the critical factor more, and hence you have a more suggestible person. But I've had the exact same experience with people who are wide awake, or at least seem to be, are talking, conversing. It's just that somehow I've actually hit a point where all their filters just go, disappear, and at that point they become wide open.
So the lady that you had up there, when you were doing that, every time you touched her, it was just the touch that had been associated that was bringing her back down.
Exactly. That's just I actually said it. You know, when you feel this touch, your eyes will close. You'll go back 10 times deeper than before. I could do it with anything. I can do it with the magic finger click, the hypno gun, right? I've seen it done, and it's kind of funny, but this is not the kind of context for. Well, actually, maybe you could do that. Anyone want to play with a hypno gun? We'll do that later. So it doesn't matter. The point is, it doesn't matter what the trigger was for reinduction. I happened to choose a touch because that was part of what we were teaching from before. It could be a word, it could be a signal, it could be something in the environment. So as soon as you see someone wear something red, off you go, right? It could be anything. It's just I happen to choose a touch as the trigger that I was going to use. One moment.
And then the last question then regarding all this is, when you said in the first, yesterday, when we were talking about the deep state of relaxation but not being completely unaware and being aware of everything, and you said that that's a preconceived notion and that's really not what hypnosis is about. But now what you're doing with this fractionation, it seems like it would be possible, or?
Absolutely, it is possible. It's totally possible. And in fact, it used to be the case. The old styles of hypnosis, like say we say from the previous, not the previous century, the one before that, the 19th century, was so long and convoluted, if for no other reason out of sheer boredom, people's minds would switch off. And they would typically, it's true. Just read the literature. It's like passing and waving hands for 2 hours, sitting there, some guy passing his hands over you. Even if there's nothing metaphysical going on, you're just going to go, oh, Christ, whatever, off I go. But then you can have your arm cut off and you don't realize, which is kind of weird, right? And that's where the idea came from, that when you're in hypnosis, you don't recall. It's 100 years out of date, but the idea has still stuck. You know how ideas sometimes take a while to catch up with people. Just like everyone talks about quantum physics, like it's this new thing. That's over 100 years old now. Do you know that? So it tends to take about a century for big ideas to kind of hit the popular mindset, and we're still stuck with the hypnosis asleep thing. Now, we've learned that we can do hypnosis without the memory loss, without the fuzzing of consciousness, etc. And that's what we use now, because we can do other things with that. But, does it mean we can't do the other? No, sure we can. Make sense? There's a question up here.
I was wondering if you could give me a summary of the ways that you could bypass the critical factor.
Summary? No. It's just everything. Anything can be used to bypass the critical factor. You can distract them, you can tie up their intellect, you can absorb their attention to such a degree they have no energy left for criticism. You can go the opposite way where they relax to the point where they don't want to think anymore. You can, Christ, what else can you do? You can fool them so that they resist the wrong thing, so they end up not resisting the thing that they should be resisting because you've got them stuck somewhere else. Yeah, swinging pocket watch usually works. So it's really, it's more of a thing of, imagine you have a really critical person and it's like sitting on someone's shoulder. How can you get that person to stop doing what they're doing? You can put them to sleep, you can distract them, you can shout so loudly that they can't hear the other person, you can give them a shot so they fall asleep, right? What else can you do to that person?
Could you tell them that it's their right to be critical?
Sure, because you see, and that's what I would call one of the bits where they resist the wrong thing, because now you're taking the ability to resist away. It's like a jiu-jitsu thing. Go on, resist, because the harder you resist, the deeper you go, right? So that's the other way of doing it, right? You can associate things to what the critical factor is going to say that actually helps the process along. So there's all kinds of things you can do. And you'll be learning quite a number of these tricks as we go through, rest assured. For the moment, the key thing is, you should realize that maybe 80% of the time, when you have full attention, you'll have no critical factor, because there's no energy left for it. Does that kind of make sense? And you know this, because think about the times when you've been fully immersed in an experience. It could be like driving at a high speed, which you never, of course, would do. It could be when doing a difficult task that you actually are up to. When you're absorbed in something you enjoy, like music or painting or art, or when you're gazing lovingly and adoringly into the eyes of that special someone and everything else disappears. So your attention is fully absorbed. At those points in time, do you self-criticize? You go, oh, that note, can't do playing music now. Do you think about, oh, my boss hates me, he's going to really shout at me next week? No. All these things are out of your awareness at that point because there's no energy left for it. Does that kind of make sense? So, as a rule of thumb, if you have attention and you can genuinely control attention, then that's one of the biggest keys to bypassing the critical factor. There are other things you can do as well, and we'll talk about a whole bunch of them on the masterclasses and on the conversational hypnosis course, etc. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, the key is, and the thing to really focus on is, do you have attention, and do you have full attention? At that point, most of the problems disappear.